asato ma sadagamaya tamaso homaham jyotirgamaya mrityormam amritam gamaya avir maedhi rudra yatte dakshinam mukham te namaham painityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality, and reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. So my subject this morning is the voice of freedom. And we're going to be talking about karma and free will. And we're going to begin with the universal common sense belief that you are a free will individual, that you have choices, that you have options in life, that you have reason, what is this? Intelligence, and can make a choice among those reasons. That you have the wisdom to see, to discriminate between the good and the evil, between the right and the wrong, between what is true and what is false. That you have the volition to initiate action and to persevere with that action once you have begun. Once you've chosen an action, we're getting a little echo here. It's
working on it.
Oh, we're getting a little, I feel like I'm in a cave or something. So, and we take responsibility for our actions. That is, we feel accountable for what we have done, what we've chosen to do. And that's reasonable because they are our own actions, they're our own choices, therefore we feel like we own them. And so we take responsibility and we expect others to do the same. Now this is just karma. So let's look here at this idea of karmic action. Karma is all about action. Karma just means action. So we're talking about human action. And our whole life is nothing but the actions that we do. Let me give you an example. I'm going to raise my arm. Isn't that miraculous? My arm went up. That's a karmic action. That's a complete karmic action within, now we're kind of zeroing in. What is an action? It's a huge, important philosophical inquiry. Whole domains of philosophy are dedicated just to the Department of Studies analyzing what is the philosophy of action. So here we're looking at what is an action. And there we see, if we do an analysis, that it has 4 component parts. That is, it has a reason, It has a prior intention, it has intention in action, and a bodily movement. Now let's look more closely at those components of the action, a single action, which, by the way, which is repeated again and again and again throughout our lives, and which each action, like a cycle moving around, forming a loop, forming a ring, forming a link, as it were, in a chain. This is the chains that bind us, karma. This is our karma. This is why we're bound. Why are we in search of freedom? Because we feel like we're bound. Why do we feel bound? Because we have all these chains on us. What are the chains? The chains are made of loops and links, and each link is an action that we have done. So let's just zero in on one action. I'm going to raise my arm. It presumes that there was a reason for what I did. And a reason just means that you have a background belief. You have a whole network of beliefs, and then you have a whole background of behind that. It means you have a belief and that you have a desire. That's a reason. That's what is a reason. I believe that I am able to raise my arm, and I wanted to raise my arm. I intended to raise my arm. That was my desire. I wanted to raise my arm. But what happened? If we were to zero in, we'd see that at that point, nothing happened. That is, those two things together were not sufficient to compel the action to happen. There was no bodily movement. What there was a gap. And in that gap is my own free will. That is, I had to make the choice, the decision to raise my arm. That is, I had to form a prior intention in my psyche. I will raise my arm. These things all happen instantaneously, unconsciously. But we're zeroing in now with a microscope. We form the prior intention. What happens now? Immediately afterward? Nothing. Because that prior intention is not sufficient to cause the bodily movement. That is, there's a gap. The gap is the gap of my choice. I have to try to raise my arm. And that trying unconsciously, as I try, what is a trying just means is that unconsciously your muscles are moving. It's secreting acetylcholine at the axon implates. I'm using some of the terminology of Professor Searle of the University of California. And it's that neurotransmitter that will cause the arm to go up. That's the bodily movement. So we have the four components. We have the reason, we have the prior intention, and then we have the free will choice, then we have the attention and action, and then we have the bodily movement. And all those together have made up an act of karma for which we are now morally responsible, and which is going to impact the future progression of our lives. The action is the key to what the direction and the trajectory of our life. That is the action that we do in the present moment. That's why the karma vadins, vadin just means, Sanskrit word that means a follower of, or a believer in the doctrine of karma. So I believe in that doctrine, and I'm a kind of an exponent of the doctrine of karma. So they believe. I say we believe. Actually, in philosophy, you shouldn't say we believe. You should say I believe. Well, okay, I believe, but I believe as a student of the law of karma, I believe that you are the captain of your own ship. You're the master of your own soul, of your own destiny. That's an interesting a metaphor. Because what is a captain, after all? A captain is not just a guy who has a boat. That's not really a captain. A captain, we think, is somebody. We have the idea of the Department of the Navy. Maybe he's been promoted to that very high position. And in fact, he has the deontic function of being a captain. And with that comes a lot of powers and responsibilities that are just inherent in that position. What are his powers? Well, he's the CEO. He's the chief executive officer of the whole ship. He's the chief decision maker. And he may take counsel with his all of the members of the crew, but in the end, in the long run, in the last instance, it is the captain who decides what will happen. So the captain is the chief decision maker. Not only that, he has more than just being an intelligent, rational decision maker. He's also a man of some character, because he's not somebody like, maybe we say, Captain Bligh, you know, what is that, the movie? The Caine Mutiny. Remember, he was kind of crazy. And there's a big mutiny because he was driven by his passions. That was not a real captain. In fact, at the end, he was court-martialed and he was just demoted. A real captain is somebody who is calm, is centered, is a man of character, who makes desire independent reasons for his decisions. And although the wind may blow and the waves and the hurricanes may blow, everybody in the ship knows that the captain is there. Calm is the calm in the center of the storm. He's there at the helm. And so they can trust that everything's okay. And the captain takes responsibility. He's taking responsibility for his actions and for the mission. His goal is to complete successfully the mission to which he has been entrusted, his goal, his purpose. And if he is successful, then he will be he'll be praised. And if he fails, then it is the captain who is blamed for the failure. That's the way it works. That's the workings of the law of karma. Let's look a little more closely at our actions and how this law works in our lives. The students of the law of karma give us the analogy of the hunter who is in a forest, and he has a quiver of arrows on his back, and he has the bow in his hand. And the teaching is that there are three kinds of actions that we can analyze within ourselves. That is, those which are coming up in the future, the things that will emerge in our psyche to do later. Those are the sanchita karma, the arrows that are already in the quiver. Then there is the arrow which is on the bow. Over that, the hunter has control. He can decide the direction, where he's going to aim and to shoot that arrow. But there's a third category of actions, which are called the prarabdha karma, which means those are the things which we have already done. They're the arrows that have already been shot and over which the hunter no longer has control. And the analogy that I like to maybe update that analogy and think about a hunter who is hunting deer in a forest, and he has a high-powered hunting rifle. He aims looking there for sees for a deer, and he looks through the trees there. He sees a movement. Yes, he aims his rifle, and he pulls the trigger. Now, the pulling of that trigger is an act of karma. Immediately, it will have two effects. First effect is going to be, it's going to be immediate and subjective. That is, it's going to change his character. It's going to reinforce the whole structure of his character and being. That happens immediately and simultaneously with following the action. But there's another result, which is delayed and indirect. That means when he pulls that trigger and the bullet goes out, and the bullet, what he thought was a deer, it turns out was the neighbor's cow. And the cow now drops dead. And the farmer, he comes over and he sees what's happened. He calls the police, and pretty soon the police sirens come, and maybe that hunter is arrested. All of those things were kind of roundabout. You see how the consequences of our actions, that's our karma, have gone around, they've cycled around like a boomerang, and they've come back again to the source. And so now that hunter now has to deal with a whole new set of circumstances, which were the result of his previous actions. So let's look here a little bit closer. We're trying to zero in on our action, on our karma. Let's look more at this idea of the prarabdha karma. That means the things that have already been done. What does that mean? That means that there's things, the concept of the doctrine of karma teaches us that everything that happens to us, well, I'm going to give you the hard version and I'm going to give you the soft version. Hard version is everything that happens in your life comes back to you. It comes back to you are the one who ultimately we can draw a thread back to your action. Things happen because of what you have done. You're responsible for everything. That is the fruits of your karma. We're talking now about the fruits. What has already happened. It's cycled around, and there's a circumstance. An event happens. Why does that happen? Well, it's happened. We can trace it back. There's a line back to our own actions. Now you may say, well, yeah, but what about something like a hurricane? So let's say that I'm trapped or caught unawares in a hurricane. You mean that a hurricane? That's a hurricane is legally it was defined, is categorized as an act of God. And there's something over which we have no control. So in the soft version of karma, you see, the soft version is, okay, yeah, there's some things over which we don't have any control, to which we have to react. But notice also that reaction is also action. Reaction is just kind of the other side of an action. So if you're going to argue it has happened to me, okay, but that implies also how you react, which is an act of karma. However, we could also argue that the idea of the softer version, that is, that things happen to us, is the idea. Eventually, even if you analyze that, first place, it's a horrible idea from the point of view of Vedanta. Because Vedanta, the idea of Vedanta is that you are you're a divine immortal soul, that you are the spirit, that you are in a position of ascendancy over nature. Nature does not dictate your life. You're not like a tumbleweed on the desert who just has no roots and has no volition or nothing. The wind comes up, blows it east, blows it west, up and down. The tumbleweed just goes wherever it is. That's not a human person. And even if you were to argue in the soft version that there are other factors there, still there is a line of causation that goes back to you, to your behavior. You are part of this event. You are part of the happening of this event. And to use the language here of the concept maybe of the Sankhya cosmology, they were atheists. They didn't really believe in a God. But they did have the idea of like a God who is like a super intelligent, cosmic intelligence, kind of like a supercomputer, who analyzes everything that happens. Everything that happens goes, and that's the input. And what comes out? What's the output? The output then is God gives each one of us what we deserve. And so everything's perfect. Everything happens exactly as it's supposed to happen. You're getting exactly what you deserve. Deserve means it goes back to you are accountable. You are responsible. You can trace the responsibility back to yourself. That is, that you are the captain of your ship. Now, well, let's say that there is a captain, and he's at the helm, and he has this huge ocean liner is moving through the water, and suddenly he's informed up ahead there's an iceberg up ahead. Now, what can the captain? The captain now, he can't just turn that ship around. He can't turn on a dime. Like maybe if we're walking, maybe we could take a sudden turn, but a ship has a huge momentum. That is the prarabdha karma. You can't just turn a ship around, but he's the captain. He can give an order. He can turn the wheel. The wheel will turn the ship a little bit, but maybe it'll be enough to make a complete U-turn there in the ocean. And he could turn that whole situation around, even though he is being influenced by and constrained by and conditioned by his own past, by the past of the movement of the boat. Similarly, it is with us. We are conditioned, yeah. Things happen to us. Things come into our lives. Circumstances change. And we could say that we are things that happen which kind of determine, that kind of force us into a position to doing something. But even this idea is not the same as the idea of fate. That means that there's nothing that we can do. We always have a choice. We can always make a decision that changes the circumstances. And so that although we may say that in a sense we are determined, but we are self-determined. We are determined by our character and by the fruits of our actions that we have done in the past. So this is the doctrine of karma. And let's look a little bit more closely at the idea of determinism. Determinism. A determinist, horrible idea, okay. And it's an idea that appears even today in our day. An ancient idea has been around forever. It appears on many different levels, whether it's philosophical or cultural or political or psychological or anything. And that's the idea that everything has a cause that predetermines the effect. That's determinism. Determines means it causes, means it is sufficient. It's a necessary and sufficient cause to dictate the effect which happens. And this is a view that this world, this is a common sense materialist, metaphysical materialism. That is, that we live in a world which is nothing but particles in motion in a field. And that if we could understand at any one point the motion and the velocity of even a single particle, then we could predetermine all of the future of whatever will happen. That's because it's a progression. In other words, it's seeing this world as a big domino game. Everything is all lined up. The dominoes are lined up, maybe. And if you just touch the first domino, it falls. And it will hit the next domino, and that domino will also fall. And so on and on it will go in a progression that can be predetermined, that can be calculated mathematically, that can be predicted. And today science says, yeah, there's such a thing called chaos theory, which means you can't possibly predict what'll happen. Things get so complicated you can't predict it. All right, well, that may be true. But that doesn't mean theoretically it could be predicted. We don't have the mechanism or the tools to predict it now. But in theory, it's predictable. It's like the idea that you're living in the Matrix. And that everything happens to us somehow. Okay, everything seems normal, but it's really all happening by this program that's being constructed by these alien intelligence that's making us happen. So this is the idea of the determinist, that we live like that. We're like brains in a vat. That's how we act. And the determinists believe, a determinist philosophy or worldview or attitude, the attitude there is that we have no free will. Of course, most metaphysical materialists believe that not only do you have no soul, you have no self, there's no God, there's no heaven, there's no soul, there's no mind, and certainly there's no free will. And that really, if you analyze it, the determinist point of view, really we're just like puppets or like marionettes. Maybe dancing there is entertaining, you see, but really somebody else is pulling the strings. Some force apart from ourselves, whether it's supernatural or it's nature or some just society or other people or something, is causing us to act. In other words, we're not acting for reason, we're acting because we've been caused. And this is the idea. Let's say that you're on a train, and you're going along in the train, and you look out the window, and there you see is the beautiful ocean, And you think, well, I think I'll just go over and I'll take a walk on the beach. Or the determinist will say, well, wait a minute. No, you can't go over and take a walk on the beach. You're in a train. You're being pulled by the engine. Those tracks are going to take you in only one direction. There's nothing you can do. So this is the idea. Determinist thinking, we could say. Doesn't have to be a whole rigorous philosophy. It's just a way of thinking, maybe. Something is happening to me that I can't deal with. And now the problem with this worldview, this is a whole attitude or whole worldview. The problem with it is that we have to give up our integrity. In order to believe in this horrible worldview, we have to give up our own integrity. That is, you can't really believe it. You can't really act in a way that is consistent with this worldview. That is determinism. That's because that's because of the principle of integrity. But integrity just means that your mind and your speech, it's called manasikam vachasikam, karmanikam mahatmanam. That's what they call Mahatma Gandhi. He's called a Mahatma. A Mahatma is that your thoughts, your speech, and your actions are all in alignment. They're all the same. Now, with a determinist, if you actually believed your philosophy, and of course now we're arguing here, it's in ancient times, in the time of Greek philosophers like Plato. Plato didn't understand this idea about weakness, what we call today a kind of weakness of will. That's an idea that's one way that Aristotle differed from Plato. He believed in a kind of weakness of will that explained a lot of our behavior. According to Plato, his idea was, if you believe something, that is, we're talking about a belief, if you believe something, really believe it, I mean, what does that mean? I believe it, but I don't really believe it. What does that mean? And Plato's idea is, if you believe it, you believe it. If you believe it, then you think that way, you speak that way, and you act that way. That's all. So there's no reason to discuss anything else. So we're going to assume here that your character is all in alignment. Assume that your thoughts, feelings, and actions are all together, and you have integrity. Then you cannot live like this with the indeterminists. Let's say, for example, that you would go into a restaurant with your friends, and you sit down, and your friends look at the menu, and they order from the waiter, and then the waiter looks at you and say, what do you choose? What are you going to have? And you think, oh, wait a minute, I'm a determinist. I can't really make decisions myself. I don't make my own decisions. I'll have to just, que sera, sera. Whatever will, let me just see what happens. What comes up? Nothing happens. But then you're immobilized. Meanwhile, the waiters will come on, what's happening with it? And you're in the mind of the determinist, he's thinking, no, I'm not gonna, I can't make a decision. Decisions are made for me by circumstances. And, but you see, even thinking like that presupposes that you are able to choose, that you've chosen to be a determinist. So you can't get away from this idea that you are a free agent. You can't reason it away. You can't rationalize it away. You can't explain it away. You are a free will individual. You are an individual. You have chosen. Okay, say I'm a determinist. You may say, okay, I've chosen to be a determinist out of my own free will. Okay, well, maybe then we just choose just to sit there and see what happens. Maybe something will happen. Maybe your friends will order for you and everything will be fine. In which case you've kind of given your power. Maybe you could do that. But you can't really live consistently on that basis. That's no basis for a philosophy of life. We don't want to end up in and that's why our goal as spiritual aspirants, our ideal is to aspire to that character virtue of integrity. We don't want to find ourselves in the same situation or position of the Brahman with his own beautiful garden. In the parable of Sri Ramakrishna, well, there was a Brahman, and he lived in a little cottage there, and he had a garden. And he spent all of his free time in that garden. And he would plant the seeds, and he would grow the flowers, and the bushes, and the tree, planted the trees, and he would water them, and he laid down each stone, in the winding paths, and everything he'd done himself. He was so proud. In fact, it was a problem. He was super proud and vain about his garden. And one day he was out there, and he looks over, and he sees there, what does he see? He sees the cow has come into the garden. And the cow is eating one of his flowers. This is the flower that he planted himself with his own hand. He grew it up, he watered it, nurtured it, and here this cow is eating it. Oh, he was so vexed. He was so annoyed. He went over, he just picked up a stick, and he began to beat that cow, and he beat the cow, and the poor cow, she fell dead. And then the Brahman, he thought, oh my God, what have I done? I, a Brahman, that's the highest caste, the most revered, prestigious kind of person, moral person in the whole hierarchy. I've just killed a sacred cow. What a sin! How can I explain this away? And then he thought back about some stories that he'd heard. And we learn in Indian mythology that all of the behaviors of the body, that everything in the body, that is your power of sight and hearing, the arms and the legs, they're all governed. Each one is governed, has a presiding deity. Things happen because, why do you think you digest your food? You don't digest your food is digested by Vaishwanara. After all, you don't know how to digest food. You don't know anything about it. It just happens. No, it doesn't happen. It's because God has made it happen. So similarly, the Brahman is thinking, he's thrashing about, how can I explain this? Then he thinks, yeah, that's right. It's Indra. The god Indra is the presiding deity of the arm. And he's the one who made my arm go up and beat that cow. Yeah, I said, that'll be my explanation. And just then he heard a ring of the bell at the garden gate. There's a traveler passing by. And the traveler says, oh, hello, sir. I hear that you have a beautiful garden here. Could you show me around? Oh, yes, said the Brahman. So he forgot about the cow. My garden? Oh, yeah. Let me show you around. And so they began looking. What is this? Oh, these flowers. Planted them myself with my own hand. The beautiful trees. And see my path here. Yes, I laid these stones. And then the traveler, they came around the bend in the path. And they said, well, what is that? So it's like, what is it? Is it a cow? What, is she sleeping? No. They go, wow, she's dead. Oh, what happened? What happened? How can we explain this? Well, the Brahmin said, yeah, the cow was eating that plant, and Indra just took hold of my arm and just with a stick and just beat the cow, and that's Indra's. I didn't do it. Indra did it. Of course, then the traveler in disguise. That's Indra in disguise, of course, coming to test the man. Oh, and then he reveals himself as Indra. Yes, chastises that Brahmin. What a hypocrite you are. And then the Brahmin, he realized he had to take responsibility for his own actions. So free will, determinism, taking responsibility, holding ourselves accountable. There's a thread. We are a factor in everything. Everything that happens in the universe. You are somehow a factor. And your factor went into the cosmic intelligence, and the superintelligence computed your factor in there, and out of it came the results, which are you are getting what you deserve to happen. And that's the beauty of it. Everybody's getting what they deserve. And so things happen it comes back to us. It comes back to our own self, to our own soul, to our own the God within us. That is the intelligence, the divine intelligence within us, that we're able to decide, to make decisions. It's called the determinative faculty. We determined. We're the determining faculty. You are a determining faculty. And so that's our taking responsibility. The karma, students of the law of karma, we don't believe in fate. The old idea of Greek, it's an old Greek idea, but it's still around with us today. We believe, hey, things happen, people believe, for example, in luck. These are all ancient ideas. The goddess of fortune, spinning of the roulette wheel, and this is all determined by beings up in supernatural beings in heaven. And fate, our fate, what can I do? It's just my fate. There's nothing I couldn't have done. That's the fates of the three sisters. One of them, if we think of our life as like a thread, one of the sisters spins the thread on the loom, or on the spinning wheel. She spins the thread. The second sister measures out the thread. And the third determines when you are going to die. So these things are all predestined. How long you will live, when you will die, have been decided by the sister's fate. Now, Swami Vivekananda, this means supernatural powers. That means the gods and the goddesses are like the planets, the stars, the movement of the stars in the heavens. That's why Swami Vivekananda tells this story about the astrologer. There's a Maharaja who one day decides that he will have his horoscope cast. And so they call in the famous astrologer. And the astrologer is in the court. And, well, he says, his horoscope. So he brings out all these big Sanskrit books with all of the positions of the stars and the sun sign and the moon sign. Very complicated Vedic mathematics he has to go through. Takes him some time. But he does it all right there. In the view of the whole court are waiting as he does all his calculations. He comes up, yes, he's arrived at a conclusion. Yes, Your Majesty, I'm sorry to inform you that you will die in 2 days. What? The Maharaja here, he's devastated. He's so impacted. What? He's shocked. He can't believe it. He's nervous. He has that night he can't sleep. And so the prime minister is thinking, it's something I've got to do, so I can't even govern, can't even attend to business here. So the next day, the prime minister says, Your Majesty, we've invited this astrologer back. Let's redo his calculations, okay? And so he comes back and he pulls out all of his reference books and he calculates the position of the sun and the moon and the stars. And then he concludes, well, I've come to the same conclusion. So sorry that you will die within 2 days. Again, the king here, he's so impacted by this. And then the prime minister looks and says, oh, really? You've made that calculation? How? Certainly you know, you've done your own horoscope, yes. Well, what are your results? When are you going to die? So I know exactly. I'm going to die in 10 years and 2 months and 2 days. Oh, is that so? said the prime minister. He took out his big scimitar, big curved sword, old-fashioned sword, cut off the head of that astrologer. Head goes rolling in the court. The king looks there, and he really had to see the prime minister. See, look at this guy. He couldn't even predict his own future. How do you think he could predict? Oh, the king was so relieved. Yeah, I'm not freed from that curse. Apologies, of course, to all those who kind of believe in astrology. Not my story. A lot of our Swamis believe in astrology, so you're in good company. And but that's the view of the students of the law of karma. Things don't happen by the will of the gods. They're the result of the factor back to your own actions. So, okay, well, I've mentioned here the hard interpretation and the soft interpretation. And maybe this morning I've wobbled a little bit. I don't intend to. But, and so a lot of questions may arise in your mind. That's good. Maybe we could discuss those later, sometime after the lecture. But let's come back to our theme. Let's put all those aside, our questions and our philosophical objections that you may raise. Let's come back to the fundamental first thesis. The first idea is that you cannot escape, you cannot get rid of this idea of your own freedom and of your own free will action. You can't explain it away. Not only that, it's presupposed in everything that we do that makes our life meaningful. We consider ourselves to be rational thinkers. But you can't have reason and rationality without presupposing free will. Because rationality presupposes that you're making a judgment about a proposition. Is it true or is it false? If you can't make a judgment, That is to say, you're already programmed to take one course, a track of events, then there's no question, then there's no discussion here of rationality, or rationality has no meaning. So your rationality presupposes your choice. So too, morality. You can't be moral without presupposing that you are a free will agent. Because morality means is that you're choosing. You're making a judgment between what is good and what's right and what's wrong, between what's good and what's evil. And that judgment will determine what action you will initiate and what you will do as a consequence. You couldn't have any sense of beauty or loveliness of the world without your freedom. But how would you know if something is beautiful or it's not beautiful? Or you have to come to that is. You have to make that decision between what is beautiful, what is not. If you can't decide, then it becomes meaningless to say one thing or another. The words become empty. In fact, all of our language becomes empty. You can't even speak without the determinative faculty. That's the buddhi. The determinative faculty enables us to choose what's the right word, what's the wrong word. Otherwise, we'd just be babbling nonsense. And so that presupposes our first proposition. You can't, to use theological, also you can't, this is big in theology, you couldn't love anyone. Certainly you couldn't love God unless you presuppose that you have freely chosen to love. Because if you haven't, if it's all happened like the falling of the dominoes, if it's all been predetermined, then love means that you've chosen someone or something because it represents your values. If you're unable to make that choice, then you can't love, and God knows that. God knows you can't really love him. God could have created. God is omniscient, omnipotent. Well, he could have created. Why didn't he create this whole world so that everybody does exactly the right thing and loves God? Everybody's a saint. Why not? Well, that's why God has given us free will. Because without free will, that's all meaningless. And so this is our subject this morning, that God has given us free will, that all that we've done in the past, that all that we are today is the result, directly or indirectly, of things that we ourselves have done in the past, that we're getting exactly what we deserve, and that everything that happens in the future is the result of what our actions factored into our actions today. And so today, the arrow is on the bow. You have the next action. And so we can see what happens in the future.
Thank you, Swami Vedarupananda, for your very thought-provoking talk. Those of you who would like to continue the discussion, the Swami will go to the greenhouse living room, the living room right next to the bookshop, for discussion, and we'll take your questions and objections, as he likes to say. So he stays at the Swami Vivekananda house in South Pasadena, which is a beautiful place of pilgrimage. If you've never visited, please make an appointment and visit. It's a place where Swami Vivekananda himself stayed for 4 weeks in 1900. So it's worth a visit. Next week our speaker is Swami Sarvadevananda. His topic, grace in spiritual life. Also we have 2 guest Swamis coming. On the Thursday the 5th, Swami Chidbrahmananda will be here, and he'll be doing the evening class. His topic is the imitation of Christ. And then Swami Sarvapriyananda will be here on the 15th of December. His topic, the mirror of consciousness. We also have Karma Yoga coming up on Saturday. We invite you to join us in doing some of the fixing up and cleaning up and pulling of weeds and trimming of bushes and whatever else we want to do by our own choice. So please join us if you can on Saturday at 9 and stay for lunch.
Which Saturday?
That's this coming Saturday, the 7th, I believe. Yes, the 7th. Great to see all of you. We have refreshments out. If this is your first time, welcome. And our bookshop is open also.
Om Dyo Shantihi Antariksha Ham Shantihi Prithivi Shantihi Apa Shantihi O Shadaya Shantihi Vanaspataya Shantihi Vishwe Deva Shantihi Brahma Shantihi Saravam Shantihi Shantireva Shantihi Same Shantiredhi Om Shantihi 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 Om. Peace is in heaven, peace is on the earth, peace is in the sky and the waters. The herbs and plants and trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. May this eternal universal peace enter our souls and beings. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.